Disclaimer. We are interested in everything and experts in nothing. We enjoy learning, but get it wrong sometimes. We mean no disrespect, and if we mess up, kindly correct us. Let's take this ride together, unless your intention is to cause harm or distress, in which case, with utmost haste, fuck right off.
So, episode 32.
32.
This is mine. And this is inspired by my youngest and sometimes most dramatic child.
Oh.
They did not want to go to school. And they were saying that is literally child labor. I said, it is not.
Not literally.
It is not literally child labor. And they were disagreeing with me. So now, anytime they get the slightest bit grumpy, I tell them I took them out of school and I'm sending them to the coal mines where they will be paid in cigarettes and gin. And so I decided, in honor of my dramatic child, I would do a little bit of a high-level overview of the time period that I am threatening my child with, which is the Industrial Revolution era of the zenith or pinnacle of child labor in the modern world as it was.
Oh my God.
Yes.
I'll see your drama and I'll raise you.
Oh, it's like, who do you think you're messing with, child? Who do you think birthed you? You were not raised with it. I was born in the darkness. I was raised with this drama.
Oh,
But yes.
Okay.
So I will preface this to say it is a high level overview.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm going to stick to the United States and Britain in the Victorian and pre-post industrial era.
Okay.
Child labor is obviously still a problematic thing in many underdeveloped countries. We touch on it a little bit, but I didn't want to go and have it turn into like, this is what it's like in the modern world, because this is already 5 pages of notes, and that would turn into 45 pages of notes, and we would all be upset at the end and crying, and it would end on a real bummer. So, high level overview, this is a very specific time period that I'm covering.
Okay. So a high level overview.
High level overview of the Industrial Revolution and child labor.
Okay. I don't know how to make this funny.
I mean, I may have chosen a poor topic to make funny, to be honest.
Funny. Okay, well, we'll go with it.
Figure it out. We'll go with it.
Okay.
So child labor, or the use of children as servants and apprentices, has been practiced throughout most of human history. We know that.
Okay.
But it reached its zenith during the Industrial Revolution. Miserable working conditions included crowded and unclean factories, a lack of safety codes or legislation, and long hours were the norm. Crucially, children could be paid less, were less likely to organize into unions, and their small stature enabled them to complete tasks in factories or mines that would be challenging for adults. So this is the column pro for the industrialists at the time of why we need to have children working in our factories and our mines. Because little hands
fit little places. Yeah.
Yes.
When did the Industrial Revolution officially start? Do we know?
Well, in 1900, 18% of all American workers were under the age of 16. So It kind of started in the United States, at least. There was a big influx in the 1840s with the Irish immigration from the potato famine, and they moved in to fill in low-level factory jobs. And then in 1880s, groups from Southern and Eastern European arrived, providing a pool of child workers. So we're looking into the late 1800s is when this is really happening. So working children were unable to attend school, creating a cycle of poverty that was difficult to break. 19th century reformers and labor organizers sought to restrict child labor and improve working conditions to uplift the masses. But it took the Great Depression, a time when Americans were desperate for employment,
no doubt,
to shake long-held practices of child labor in the United States. So even though we're going to get into some laws were passed, but they weren't being enforced.
Gotcha. Well, okay.
So
that sounds unusual.
Yeah.
Okay, with you.
How did we get here? So child labor in the United States is where I'm going.
Okay.
The Puritan work ethic of the 13 colonies and their founders, hard work over idleness, and the ethos applied to children as well. Through the first half of the 1800s, child labor was an essential part of the agricultural and handicraft economy of the United States.
Okay.
Children worked on family farms and as indentured servants for others. To learn a trade, boys began their apprenticeships between the ages of 10 and 14. So this was kind of, and we get kind of in that gray area between, okay, what's considered child labor in the exploitation sense, and what's considered you have a family farm, everyone works on the family farm.
Yeah, and like apprenticeship, I can kind of see that being more like a trade school situation.
Well, an apprenticeship situation, I mean, that is going to essentially become their trade. A lot of times the boys that are going into those apprenticeships, maybe the sons of the blacksmith or the sons of the tanner or whatever it is. And so they're learning their trade. They aren't essentially going to pursue higher education because their career path is already, I don't want to say decided for them, but they already know what trade they're going to be in.
Yeah, so that feels less like exploitation to me than more like schooling.
Yeah, it seems more like this was just life because you have a trade and this is your trade.
Yeah.
But this is, the first half of the 1800s. And there was less focus on higher education and more focus on just making
get by day to day.
Get by day to day. Okay. Before the Civil War, women and children played a critical role in American manufacturing, though it was still a relatively small part of the economy. Advances in manufacturing techniques after the war increased the number of jobs and therefore child laborers.
Okay.
So we talked about in 1900, 18% of all of the American workers were under the age of 16.
It's wild.
Yes. The potato famine gave us an influx of immigrants and then an influx of their children as well. The Industrial Revolution causes a need for tiny workers. So with the onset of the Industrial Revolution in Britain in the late 18th century, there was a rapid increase in the industrial exploitation of labor. Now this is straight up exploitation. Like, wait,
hold on, sorry. 18th century or 1800s?
18th century.
So we're in the 1700s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This is the onset of the Industrial Revolution.
Got it.
In the late 18th century.
Okay.
So they had that rapid increase in industrial exploitation of labor, and this includes child labor.
In Britain.
Mm-hmm. This is in Britain. So industrial cities such as Birmingham, Manchester, and Liverpool rapidly grew from small villages into large cities, improving child mortality rates. So that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
These cities drew in a population that was rapidly growing due to increased agricultural output. This process was replicated in other industrializing countries. So cities get bigger, people have more access to food, people have more access to, I would say, cleanliness, but we know that didn't really happen.
That didn't really happen.
But the more settled the city, the lower the child mortality rates. Like, it's kind of the same with like first world countries is going to have a lower child mortality rate than like a second or a third world country.
I think it's just a greater like access to resources when people
resources
are stable.
In general. Yeah.
Okay.
In the Victorian era in particular, it became notorious for the conditions under which children were employed. So children as young as 4 were employed in production factories and mines, working long hours in dangerous, often fatal working conditions.
Oh my God.
4.
I mean, we don't even put those kids in school yet, and they have been working.
No.
Oh, Christ. Okay.
Yeah, like when they're 4, they're still kind of grasping the ABCs in the right order, let alone being shoved in a coal mine.
No, thank you.
That's crazy. What would they do in the coal mine?
What would they do?
They would crawl through tunnels too narrow or too low for adults, which just get a really short guy. Don't make the 4-year-old do it.
I don't understand. Okay.
Children also worked as errand boys, which that one's not so bad.
I mean, we do that in a very like less exploitative way, but it's completely normal in a household. Hey, go run and tell daddy, blah 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 blah.
Right. Or go tell your sister, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Or go let the dog out, or in, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I feel like the errand boys would be faster. Like if you're going from they say they need more pitchforks or whatever, or I don't know. Clearly, I didn't do enough research as to what they could possibly need. But I feel like that would be better.
Yeah.
There were crossing sweepers, which is kind of like a street sweeper, like way back before like a street was paved. It was just kind of cleaning debris and stuff because nobody ever took care of things. They just threw shit away, like wherever they were. They just threw shit down and whatever. Shoe blacks, which is a shoe shining, or we're selling matches, flowers, and other cheap goods.
Okay.
Now, of course, there's the little match girl, the Hans Christian Andersen little match girl story that makes me sob every time because it's a little Victorian girl. And I had this storybook when I was a kid, illustrated. Of course, she was a Victorian child, looked very sickly, wasn't going to make it through the winter. And of course, it is in the winter in this story. She's got a patchwork dress. She's trying to sell matches. And then, of course, she lights a match because she's so cold and she sees a beautiful Christmas tree in front of her. And then she lights another match and there's a beautiful feast in front of her. And then she lights another match and it's her grandmother who had passed away or something, blah, 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 blah. Basically, she freezes to death. Yeah, he kind of wrote it as this is a real possibility of what was happening to these people.
Why did that little girl not go home?
She didn't have a home.
Where'd she get the matches to sell?
See, okay, it was a story.
Okay.
There are questions I don't have answers to.
Okay.
But obviously this is an exploited child laborer who was
I want to fix it.
I know. We can't fix the 1800s story about the little match girl. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but I did have a book where I had another book where there was a Victorian couple that wanted to adopt her. They saw her and were like, "Oh, we should take her in." And I'm going to stop talking right there.
Wait. Oh no. Oh no. Now I'm scared.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. We're just going to move on. Some children undertook work as apprentices to respectable trades such as building or domestic servants. Okay. There were over 120,000 domestic servants in London in the mid 18th century. So a domestic servant is obviously someone in someone's house, housekeeper, cook, scullery maid, whatever. They're working inside someone's house. They're part of the household staff.
Okay. I have mixed feelings about that.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings about that because I mean, if they're orphans, then they're getting like room and board and stuff. But also, why couldn't you just adopt them? Why do you got to make them work? I don't know. I don't like that.
There's a lot of things we would change in mid 18th century London.
Well, and we did clearly.
Yeah. But this wasn't always great because working hours were long. Builders worked 64 hours a week in the summer and 52 hours in the winter. And servants worked 80-hour weeks.
Oof.
Yeah. So child labor played an important role in the Industrial Revolution from the outside, often brought on by economic hardship. So basically, the underlying villain is poverty.
Yeah.
That son of a bitch is never going to go away.
Yeah.
It is going to be the underlying villain the whole time.
Okay.
Which isn't shocking, really. But in 19th century Great Britain, 1/3 of poor families were without a breadwinner.
Okay.
As a result of death or abandonment, obliging many children to work from a young age.
That sucks.
It does. In England and Scotland in 1788, 2/3 of workers in 143 powered cotton mills were described as children. And this is the unfun part. A high number of children also worked as sex workers, which that wasn't really a choice. That was more of a survival.
No. Okay.
So the author Charles Dickens worked at the age of 12 in a blacking factory, which is a shoe polish factory. because his family